Welcome to this deep dive. We've got a really interesting collection of insights for you today, all drawn from a recent overview of artificial intelligence across Africa.
That's right. We're looking specifically at March and April of 2025.
Exactly. Think of this as the quick way, really, to get up to speed on the most significant happenings and, the exciting progress in the African AI space.
Yeah, we've analyzed a pretty comprehensive look at the landscape, pulling out the key developments. So everything from new government policies, innovative projects,
Right.
to the energy around startups, important tech advancements, and, of course, those crucial discussions about investment and collaboration across the continent.
And what immediately jumps out, I think, as we delve into this is this fascinating combination.
Hmm.
On one side, there's this powerful wave of enthusiasm and real forward movement in African AI.
Definitely.
But we also see that there are still some considerable challenges that, well, they need to be addressed.
Absolutely. It's that classic mix of huge potential and real hurdles.
Okay, so where should we begin? How should we unpack all of this?
Let's maybe start by looking at some of the major initiatives that were either launched or, significantly advanced during March and April. These really lay the groundwork for future growth.
Sounds like a plan. Okay, first up is the launch of UNESCO AI Day. That was March 9th.
Right.
Now, this was a global undertaking, but it placed a very specific emphasis on Africa, developing nations, and also boosting the involvement of girls in the field.
Yeah, and that focus is really key.
That feels like a really important statement right at the outset.
It was indeed. This was a collaboration between UNESCO Codemo, which is a coding education platform,
Okay.
and UNESCO May. And what's particularly noteworthy is their sort of multifaceted strategy.
Hmm.
Their aim is to promote AI education worldwide, but with a very clear focus on making it inclusive.
And they've got some very concrete plans to achieve this, haven't they?
They do.
Things like free access to the Codema platform for developing countries, a major upcoming report on global youth AI literacy, dot coding competitions, and even these AI Africa tours. It sounds like a real effort to build those fundamental skills.
Absolutely. And that focus on foundational AI literacy and coding skills is just so vital.
Yeah.
It directly tackles the skills gap that we know is a significant factor, in the broader adoption of AI across Africa.
Right.
Furthermore, when you consider Africa's incredibly youthful population, the potential there,
Huge potential.
this kind of initiative could unlock tremendous potential and really align with the UN Sustainable Development Goals,
Yeah.
the SDGs.
The global targets, yeah.
Exactly. It's about cultivating the human talent needed for a truly African AI-driven future.
Definitely. Now, shifting our focus a bit to developments within Africa itself, we saw the launch of the Maker University Center for AI and Data Science, or MACAD,
Ah, yes, in Kampala.
in Kampala, Uganda, yeah, March 13th. This strikes me as a really significant step in building that local expertise.
It is, very much so. This center is specifically dedicated to AI research and innovation that's, tailored to the unique developmental needs of Africa.
Right.
And at the launch, they highlighted some potentially transformative applications, like AI-powered diagnostics for diseases like malaria and tuberculosis.
Wow.
Can you imagine the impact that could have, particularly in rural areas where access to healthcare professionals can be so limited?
Exactly. In regions where getting to a doctor or specialist is a real challenge, having AI as a diagnostic tool, that could be a genuine game changer.
Hmm.
And the fact that this is happening at a leading African university like Maker, it's about embedding AI research within the continent.
Nurturing that local expertise, yeah.
Yeah.
And hopefully reducing the brain drain, that talent leaving Africa for opportunities elsewhere.
You mentioned that challenge earlier, and centers like this feel like a direct response.
Precisely. It's a strategic investment. It's about establishing a self-sustaining AI ecosystem right there in Uganda. Now, let's pivot a bit and look at the startup scene. This is often where we see some of the most dynamic and, well, innovative solutions coming through.
Oh, I always find the startup stories fascinating. What caught your attention there?
Well, the announcement in April of the launch of Smartly Africa in Casablanca, Morocco, is particularly noteworthy.
Okay, Smartly Africa.
Yeah, this is a company focused on building what are known as large language models, LLMs.
Right, LLMs. For someone who isn't maybe deeply technical, what does that actually mean in practical terms?
That's a great question. Think of them as the AI behind sophisticated language understanding and generation,
Yeah.
like what powers advanced translation tools or those really smart chatbots you sometimes interact with.
Got it. Okay.
Exactly. And Smartly Africa has made some, frankly, impressive progress very quickly. Founded just in January 2025 by Hicham Tahiri.
So very recent.
Very recent. By April, this relatively small team had already developed and released as open source their first two models for Morocco.
Wow.
One for Darija, which is a dialect of Moroccan Arabic, and another for Tamazight, the Amazi language.
Okay.
Now, what's really interesting is that they reportedly outperformed major global systems. Well, talking GPT-4o, Google Translate, Meta's NLLB,
Yes, sir.
in translating into these local languages. And they apparently achieved this with a comparatively modest budget.
Wow. Outperforming the big global players in a very specific local context. That really underscores the importance of that local grounding, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It speaks volumes. They're taking a very collaborative approach, working closely with native speakers, linguistic experts, cultural institutions.
Right.
Their vision is to create practical business applications, things like chatbots and voice bots, but in local languages for African companies.
Yeah.
This trend towards hyper-localized AI is just so critical. Global models often struggle. They miss the nuances and specificities of African languages and cultures.
It makes perfect sense. Why rely on a generic model when you can have something custom built for your specific needs? And it also ties into those broader continental discussions we've been hearing about things like data sovereignty, addressing algorithmic bias, and developing AI solutions that are truly relevant to African contexts.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Smartly, Africa seems to really embody that desire for tailored, contextually relevant AI. And speaking of recognizing local innovation, the Ghana AI Summit and Awards in April also highlighted some very promising startups.
Oh, yes, the awards. Tell me more. Who are some of the standout winners?
Well, FIO actually won 2 awards, which is impressive, for their AI-powered credit scoring algorithms. That's a fantastic example of how AI can drive financial inclusion.
Huge area. Yeah.
Then Eben Capital was recognized for their AI smart POS system. And Abina AI won for creating what's being called Africa's first offline AI voice assistant.
Offline. That's interesting.
Yeah, potentially huge for accessibility in areas with limited or no internet connectivity, right?
Absolutely.
And NPONEU won an award for their virtual meeting minutes tool, Sensual Meet.
It's great to see such practical applications being recognized, particularly in areas like financial inclusion and making technology more accessible. It really demonstrates AI being used to solve real-world problems in Ghana.
It does. And beyond the winners, the reports also highlighted a number of other interesting African AI startups.
Like who?
We saw Mini in Kenya using AI for crop and soil health monitoring. Hello Tractor predicting tractor service demand in Kenya and Nigeria.
Oh, interesting logistics application.
Yeah. Concrete in Senegal has a tool called ADIA that helps entrepreneurs develop business plans. And even a Ugandan company, 3D Services Limited, with an AI-powered dash cam called Daydas H AI.
A dash cam. Okay.
Yeah, with advanced safety features, apparently. There's also Paybox in Ghana, using AI for financial tracking via WhatsApp. Dataware with an AI chatbot for ACSTA guidance.
Wow, the range is broad.
In Farmerline, also in Ghana, using AI-driven sentiment analysis to understand farmer challenges. The sheer variety of applications is quite impressive.
It sounds like there's a real dynamism across different sectors in different parts of the continent. Okay, so what about some of the broader technological advancements and research that were in focus during this period?
Well, going back to the Ghana AI Summit for a second, they also awarded an AI system for cocoa disease detection as the best AI research.
Cocoa disease detection.
Yeah. Developed by Miracle A. Adanashi. This is a really compelling example of applying AI to a sector that is so economically important, not just to Ghana, but to much of West Africa.
Hugely important.
Imagine the positive impact on crop yields and farmer livelihoods if diseases can be detected and managed more effectively.
That's incredibly practical, and it ties in with the work being done on local languages too, doesn't it? It's about tailoring AI to very specific African challenges.
Absolutely. The efforts of Smartly Africa and others are part of this broader movement to develop AI capabilities for African languages.
Right.
Researchers are increasingly highlighting the limitations of current LLMs because, well, there's a lack of data from African languages.
The models just don't have enough to learn from.
Exactly. And there's a growing push for more collaborative, participatory research. Research that actually involves local communities who are, after all, the custodians of their own languages and language data.
It's about building language technologies that are truly inclusive, owned by the communities.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
You can't really build effective language models without the actual language data.
And what about the buzz around generative AI? We've been hearing so much about tools like ChatGPT globally. Is that finding its way into the African context?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Generative AI is gaining traction and sparking a lot of conversation across Africa. Reports indicate its growing use in various professional sectors: cybersecurity, sales, customer relations, marketing,
Okay.
for automating tasks and improving efficiency. Tools like Microsoft Copilot are being seen as something that can really empower employees.
Right.
There's also exciting research exploring how LLMs can be applied to agricultural extension services. Imagine generating localized advice for farmers via these tools.
Wow, tailored advice. Yeah. Even the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, the FAO, is piloting its own specialized LLM for agricultural advice in Ethiopia and Mozambique.
Interesting. FAO getting involved directly.
Yeah. And the market projections for generative AI in Africa are quite significant, suggesting substantial growth in this area is expected.
It sounds like it's moving beyond just the initial hype and finding some very practical and impactful applications already.
Yeah.
Now, you also mentioned something sort of in passing about an AI training breakthrough in China. How does that potentially relate to Africa?
That's right. Ant Group in China reportedly developed new techniques for training AI models using domestically produced Chinese chips.
Okay.
And the key thing is this could significantly reduce the cost of training these complex models.
And the relevance for Africa is?
Well, access to high-performance computing infrastructure is a major challenge on the continent.
Challenge, yes.
So if the process of training sophisticated AI models can become less resource-intensive, less costly, it could really lower the barrier to entry for African researchers and developers.
Okay, so it could make advanced AI development more accessible.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, even technological advancements happening elsewhere can have a ripple effect and create new possibilities on the continent.
Right. Now, let's shift our focus to the policy landscape. It sounds like there was some significant progress on that front as well in March and April.
Absolutely. These 2 months saw some really important steps forward in terms of establishing the frameworks for AI development and deployment in Africa.
Okay, so first up, Kenya launched its national AI strategy for 2025 to 2030. That sounds like a pretty significant milestone.
It is indeed. It's a government-led vision for ethical, inclusive, and innovation-driven adoption of AI, part of their broader digital transformation agenda.
And what are the core components?
The strategy is built around several key pillars: establishing robust governance frameworks, sort of localizing global norms, looking at future regulation, risk classification, expanding digital infrastructure networks, data centers, cloud, research hubs, managing data effectively, local ecosystems, privacy, cybersecurity, ethics, and really embedding those ethical considerations throughout the entire AI lifecycle.
It sounds very comprehensive.
Yeah.
And it's also looking at aligning with broader continental efforts, like the African Union's, the AU's AI agenda.
Exactly. And the implications for companies operating in the region?
Well, the strategy suggests potential data localization requirements down the line.
Ah, okay.
A need to adhere to evolving ethical guidelines, especially in sensitive sectors, and both opportunities and potential restrictions related to infrastructure development. Global companies will definitely need to pay close attention to these emerging legal frameworks.
So Kenya's really trying to set the pace.
It appears that way. They seem to be positioning themselves as a regulatory leader in sub-Saharan Africa with this structured, forward-looking approach. They're aiming to shape the narrative around AI and ensure it aligns with their national priorities.
A clear indication to both local innovators and international players about the direction Kenya intends to take. Meanwhile, South Africa is also making progress on its national AI policy framework, isn't it? Slightly different stage, perhaps.
Yes, their Department of Communications and Digital Technologies, the DCDT, confirmed that the framework was scheduled for official evaluation in April. That was after a period of public consultation.
Okay, so evaluation stage.
Right. Their approach emphasizes a human-centric perspective, often referred to as HTL, human in the loop or human over the loop. Also, professional responsibility, cultural values, safety, transparency, fairness, and a strong focus on R&D, including things like regulatory sandboxes and foundational models.
And privacy.
Definitely prioritizing privacy and data protection, ensuring alignment with existing legislation like POPIA. South African officials have also been quite vocal about the importance of Africa having a strong voice in global AI governance discussions.
It's interesting to see the different approaches. Kenya with a finalized strategy ready for implementation. South Africa going through this multi-stage evaluation and consultation process.
Yeah, it highlights that there's no single blueprint for navigating AI policy. Different national timelines and methodologies.
Right. Now, moving beyond national efforts, what was happening at the continental and regional levels? The AU seems active.
The African Union certainly placed AI high on its agenda. Their Peace and Security Council, the PSC, held a ministerial meeting back in March,
Okay.
specifically to discuss the impact of AI on peace, security, and governance in Africa. Morocco actually chaired that meeting.
And the core message.
A key point underscored was that AI's growth is simply outpacing governance right now. The tech is moving faster than the rules.
A common theme globally, unfortunately.
Indeed. And you can easily see how AI could have both positive and potentially negative implications for peace and security.
Absolutely. What were some of the key discussion points during that PSC meeting?
They were focused on developing a strategic approach to AI governance, one that aligns with both AU and United Nations frameworks, strengthening national cybersecurity capabilities, referencing the Malabo Convention specifically, establishing an AU-wide ethical framework for AI that respects human rights,
Crucial.
enhancing their continental early warning system, the CEWS, possibly using AI, and defining the role of their newly formed advisory group on AI. All these were key topics.
And were specific risks mentioned?
Yes, concerns were definitely raised about the potential for AI to exacerbate conflicts, things like autonomous weapons, disinformation campaigns,
Right.
even inaccurate AI predictions potentially leading to instability.
It's vital to have these discussions at the highest levels, given the potential ramifications. And you mentioned an AU advisory group on AI. Tell us more about that.
Yes, they held their inaugural meeting just before the PSC meeting in early March. This group is comprised of experts from across Africa's 5 regions and various AU departments. It was established following the finalization of its terms of reference in February 2025.
And their mandate.
Broadly, to assess the impact of AI and, importantly, to potentially harmonize policy recommendations across the continent. Try and get everyone moving in a similar direction.
That makes sense. Harmonization is key.
Yeah. The fact that the AU is so deliberately focusing on the peace and security dimensions through both the PSC and this advisory group really highlights the seriousness with which they're approaching this dual-use technology.
Yeah.
They want to proactively manage the potential risks.
It sounds like they're trying to get ahead of the curve, which is so important in a rapidly evolving field like AI. Okay, and then there was the significant global AI summit on Africa, held in Kigali in April.
Yes, that was a major event.
That sounds like it brought together a lot of different stakeholders.
It really did. It was an inaugural summit co-hosted by Rwanda's Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, C4IR Rwanda, and their Ministry of ICT and Innovation in partnership with the World Economic Forum.
And the theme.
The theme was very pointed. AI and Africa's demographic dividend, reimagining economic opportunities for Africa's workforce.
Focusing on the youth potential.
Exactly. They had over 1,000 participants, global leaders, African ministers, heads of state, big tech companies, investors, academics, international organizations, a real mix.
What were some of the key messages that came out of that summit? What was the feeling?
Rwandan President Paul Kagame gave a strong message. Africa must be an active participant, an active player in the AI revolution, not just a consumer or a market for technologies developed elsewhere.
Right, shaping its own destiny.
Precisely. There were strong calls for strategic investments in digital infrastructure, massive focus on developing a skilled workforce, and promoting continental integration to create larger markets.
Infrastructure and skills, recurring themes.
Absolutely. The Secretary General of the ITU, Doreen Bogdan-Martin, stressed the need for trustworthy AI guided by ethical values, promoting inclusive governance, human-centered design.
Trustworthy AI, yeah.
And the chairperson of the AU Commission, H.E. Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, reaffirmed the AU's commitment to harnessing AI for their long-term Agenda 2063 and the Continental AI Strategy.
It sounds like a really important event for setting the overall direction and maybe building consensus around AI in Africa.
I think so. It felt like a crucial convergence point, fostering dialogue, articulating a shared vision, emphasizing both the opportunities like that youth dividend and leapfrogging potential, but also the prerequisites: investment skills, ethics, infrastructure.
And I believe there was also a proposal, or at least significant discussion, around a dedicated African AI fund.
Yes, that was a major talking point coming out of Kigali.
Okay.
Rwanda's Minister of ICT and Innovation, Paula Ingabire, specifically mentioned it as a desired outcome. a mechanism to collectively mobilize financial resources for infrastructure and the broader digital transformation needed for AI.
That directly addresses the underfunding issue we discussed earlier.
Exactly. It could be a real catalyst, a strategic pivot towards collective self-reliance and resource mobilization if it gains traction and gets properly structured.
That would be a really significant step, fostering greater self-reliance in funding AI development on the continent. Now, we also saw some policy-related training programs and events taking place, right? It's not just about the high-level strategies.
Exactly right. There's a growing ecosystem focused on building capacity in AI policy and ethics on the ground.
Like what?
Well, for example, the African Observatory on Responsible AI and the University of Cape Town UCT Ethics Lab offered an online course specifically on AI ethics and policy in Africa.
Okay, targeted training.
Yeah. There are also webinars looking at the implications of AI agents in automation and legal practice, including the ethical side, and courses organized by the ITU and AFRLT, the African Advanced Level Telecommunications Institute on Digital Transformation in the Public Sector, held in Nairobi.
So practical skills building.
Definitely. And looking ahead, there are plans underway for the second conference on the state of AI in Africa, scheduled for Nairobi in June. The theme is specifically shaping responsible and ethical AI governance policy and regulation in Africa.
It's really encouraging to see that focus on developing the necessary skills and knowledge to navigate the policy landscape effectively. Okay, let's talk money. The investment pulse. What was the overall picture in March and April?
Well, globally, the investment landscape for AI remains incredibly active, almost frantic, you might say.
Yeah, the AI boom continues.
But the situation in Africa presents a significant contrast. Africa currently possesses only a tiny percentage, maybe 1 to 2% of the world's data center capacity.
Yeah, low.
Yeah. And something like 94% of global AI startup funding is concentrated in just 2 countries, neither of which are in Africa, likely the US and China.
So that vast gap remains a primary challenge.
It absolutely does. It's a major constraint.
But despite that, there are still optimistic projections for market growth within Africa, aren't there?
Yes, definitely. Market analyses, like one from Statista mentioned around March, suggest substantial growth in the generative AI market in Africa in the coming years. We're talking potential growth from under $1 billion in 2024 to nearly $9 billion by 2028.
Significant growth potential.
Yeah, and older, broader reports estimated AI could contribute trillions to the continent's GDP by 2030. These kinds of projections continue to drive interest and highlight the potential returns, even with the current disparities.
So that potential keeps the conversation going.
Exactly. And globally, there were also some maybe encouraging signs mentioned around April, a general improvement in early-stage startup funding overall in 2025, partly fueled by the AI boom. Even reports of average startup CEO salaries increasing globally.
Okay, so maybe a slightly better climate overall.
Potentially, yeah. Although, again, not specific to Africa, it provides background context of possibly more favorable conditions. But those regional disparities remain very, very real.
Right. So a lot of promise, but still a significant gap to bridge in terms of attracting that large-scale investment. You mentioned the proposal for an African AI fund earlier coming out of Kigali.
Yes.
Were there any other specific funding activities or initiatives during March, April that are worth noting?
The African AI Fund proposal was definitely the most prominent new discussion point around funding during this period.
Okay.
It's worth mentioning InstaDeep again, though. While their big acquisition by BioNTech happened before March 2025,
Right, that was earlier.
their ongoing activities, like planning to launch an AI research hub in Kigali and their involvement in the Young African AI Research Fellowship, they demonstrate how those kinds of larger investments can have a continuing positive impact on the ecosystem. Rwanda is clearly benefiting from attracting entities like that.
So follow-on effects from previous deals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But interestingly, the specific materials we reviewed for March and April 2025 didn't actually contain reports of specific new venture capital funding rounds being closed for African AI companies during those 2 months.
That is a little surprising, given all the other activity we've discussed, the strategies, the startups, the summit.
It is a bit. Perhaps it reflects a lag in reporting, which often happens, or maybe the primary focus during this specific period really was on these broader strategic initiatives, policy developments, and ecosystem building rather than deal announcements.
Possibly. What about mergers and acquisitions? M&A activity?
No mergers or acquisitions involving African AI firms were reported in the information we examined for March and April 2025 either.
Okay, so the investment landscape during this specific snapshot seems to have been more about laying groundwork, discussing future strategies like the fund, rather than a flurry of concrete deals being announced.
That seems to be the picture for those 2 months, yeah.
Okay, now let's take a quick spin across the continent. Look at some of the regional AI activities and news that stood out. It sounds like there was quite a bit happening in different parts of Africa.
Absolutely. It wasn't confined to just one or two hubs. In West Africa, Ghana was particularly active, as we mentioned, with its AI Summit and awards, really showcasing local talent and innovation.
Right.
Nigeria is often described as a nascent or waking up AI nation with increasing activity, especially in areas like using AI for TB screening and in agriculture. They've got things like AI Saturdays, Legos, community building. Senegal saw its concrete startup gaining attention. Côte d'Ivoire hosted a blockchain and AI B2B event. Even Togo had a mention related to the Africa Prize shortlist.
Okay, so a lot happening in West Africa. What about East Africa? Kenya seemed to be a real hub.
Kenya was indeed very active. The launch of its national AI strategy was obviously a major highlight.
Yeah, the big policy piece.
We also saw their participation in UNESCO's Youth Coding Initiative, ongoing progress among various agri-tech AI startups like Amini, the Nuru AI project for crop diseases. Nairobi is also clearly positioning itself, preparing to host some significant AI and technology-focused events later in the year.
And that Microsoft G42 initiative.
Yes, the big digital ecosystem initiative involving Microsoft and G42 announced for Kenya is also a notable development for the region's infrastructure potential.
And elsewhere in East Africa.
Rwanda, of course, hosted the Global AI Summit and continues to strengthen its position as an AI destination. C4IR Rwanda, the InstaDeep AI Research Hub plans, the fellowship program. They already had an AI policy in place, too. Uganda saw the launch of its Makad Center at Maker, the -HAI-CAM startup. Tanzania established a multidisciplinary AI lab, and Ethiopia and Mozambique were both part of that FAO LLM pilot program for agriculture.
It sounds like a really diverse mix of policy development, startup activity, research initiatives, and international collaborations taking place across East Africa. What about Southern Africa?
South Africa was primarily focused on advancing its national AI policy framework during this period. They have a growing grassroots AI movement and established institutions like C4IR South Africa and AISA, the AI Institute of South Africa. They also hosted the Africa Agri-Tech Conference in Pretoria.
And other countries.
Mozambique was mentioned again for the FAO pilot, and also participation in the Africa Prize for Engineering Innovation shortlist, along with Botswana and Namibia, also having UNESCO coding initiatives or Africa Prize mentions. Zambia had some mining sector news, but no specific AI developments noted in these snippets.
Okay. And finally, North Africa.
Morocco stood out with the launch of Smartly Africa, focusing on those local language models.
Right, the LLM startup.
And Morocco also hosted the major GITEX Africa event in Marrakech, which had a strong emphasis on AI across various sectors. They are clearly positioning themselves as a regional technology hub and, as we mentioned, chaired that crucial AU-PSC meeting on AI's security implications.
And Egypt and Tunisia.
Egypt has an existing national AI strategy and is seen as a nascent AI nation with exploration in AI and blockchain for infrastructure. Tunisia is also often described as a waking up AI nation, partly due to InstaDeep's historical presence there before the acquisition.
It's truly fascinating to see this level of activity happening across the entire continent, north, south, east, west. It really paints a picture of a dynamic and rapidly evolving landscape, even with the challenges.
Absolutely. It's definitely not monolithic. Lots of different things happening in parallel.
Now let's maybe try and synthesize this a bit. Delve into the core of the matter. What are the key challenges and opportunities that were really highlighted across all these reports and events during March and April 2025?
The overview really underscored a consistent set of challenges, things that came up repeatedly.
Okay, what are the big ones?
The lack of robust digital infrastructure is a major one. Still a huge impediment.
Computing power, connectivity.
Exactly. Computing power, one source mentioned only 5% of African AI innovators felt they had the resources they needed. Data center capacity, as we said, only 1–2% of the global share, and just unreliable or expensive connectivity in many places. This was a big topic at the Global AI Summit.
Okay, infrastructure first. What else?
Data. Access to large, high-quality, local data is difficult. There's often a reliance on external data, which raises all sorts of bias and relevance concerns.
Right.
And tied to that is the growing emphasis on privacy, cybersecurity, and data sovereignty. You saw that in Kenya's strategy, the AU discussions. This could create more pressure for data localization, which presents its own challenges and opportunities.
Makes sense. Data is crucial. Then skills.
Skills gap and talent drain. Still a huge issue. A significant shortage of AI-skilled personnel due to, well, gaps in the education system sometimes. One figure from the summit suggested Africa only has about 4% of the global AI workforce.
Only 4%. Wow.
Yeah. And then the brain drain problem talent leaving for opportunities abroad. So the need for investment in education and training is paramount. You see responses like the UNESCO AI Day, MACAD, those policy courses.
Okay. Infrastructure, data, skills,
L.
funding.
Funding scarcity. That dramatic disparity in AI investment compared to global hubs like the US and China. It limits startup growth, infrastructure development, research. It touches everything. The proposal for the African AI Fund is a direct response to this.
Right, the collective action idea.
And finally, ethical concerns and governance gaps. The need for context-specific ethical frameworks and governance, concerns about bias, fairness, privacy, potential misuse of AI for surveillance or manipulation, misinformation.
Yeah.
And just the fact that the rapid pace of AI development is outpacing governance efforts.
And security risks, too, from the AU meeting.
Yes, the potential threats highlighted by the AUPSC. Autonomous weapons, AI exacerbating conflicts through inaccurate predictions or resource allocation, cybersecurity vulnerabilities, disinformation impacting stability. Those are very real concerns being discussed at high levels.
Those are some considerable hurdles. It paints a challenging picture. But what about the flip side? What are the major opportunities that are driving all this activity and investment of effort? Why the optimism?
Because the opportunities are truly significant, massive potential.
Like what?
Firstly, the leapfrogging potential. The chance for Africa to bypass some traditional costly stages of development by leveraging AI and fourth industrial revolution technologies. Think about how mobile money leapfrogged traditional banking in many places.
Right. Applying that to other sectors.
Exactly. Potential to revolutionize finance, healthcare, agriculture, education. Then there's the demographic dividend. Africa has the world's youngest and fastest growing population.
Over 830 million youth projected by 2050.
Incredible numbers. That's a massive potential workforce and consumer base for AI innovation if they are skilled up and given the opportunities. That was the central theme of the Kigali Summit.
Tapping into that youth energy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then accelerating the Sustainable Development Goals. AI applications are directly relevant to so many SDGs. Improving healthcare access and outcomes, boosting food security and climate resilience in agriculture, fostering economic growth and decent work, driving industry, innovation, infrastructure.
So real alignment with development goals.
Very strong alignment. Also the opportunity to solve local challenges. We're seeing local innovators applying AI to tackle context-relevant African problems. Crop disease detection in Ghana, financial inclusion via credit scoring, remote healthcare diagnostics, tackling linguistic diversity with tailored language models like Smartly Africa, improving agricultural logistics.
AI for Africa by Africans.
That's the goal. And related to that is the potential for economic transformation and job creation, boosting productivity, enabling innovation, creating entirely new industries and job types, contributing significantly to continental GDP.
And the ecosystem itself is growing.
Yes. Despite the challenges, the AI ecosystem in Africa is demonstrably growing. Reports mention over 2,400 businesses involved, though many are early-stage startups. You've got the proliferation of community initiatives like Deep Learning in Daba, AI Saturdays Lagos, universities establishing AI centers, and growing international interest and partnerships forming. It's definitely developing.
It sounds like there's a real sense of optimism then, and a strong determination to overcome these challenges and capitalize on these significant opportunities. Okay, one sector that kept recurring in our sources, and you've mentioned it several times, was agriculture.
Yes.
It seems like AI is really cultivating some interesting possibilities there in Africa. Let's maybe hone in on that for a bit.
Absolutely. Agriculture emerged as a primary area of focus for AI application and discussion during March and April 2025. It makes sense, given its importance to so many African economies and livelihoods.
So what were the key applications being highlighted?
Several key areas. Crop disease and pest detection was a big one.
Like the cocoa example in Ghana.
Exactly. And projects like Nuru AI in Kenya for cassava and maize diseases, using computer vision, analyzing images from drones or phones.
Okay, disease detection. What else?
Precision farming and resource management, using AI to optimize irrigation, fertilization, pest control, even harvesting times, based on real-time data. AI-driven soil health monitoring using sensors and IoT. Smart irrigation systems.
Making farming more efficient.
Much more efficient and sustainable. Then there's advisory services and information access for farmers.
The FAO pilot, for instance.
Yes, The potential of generative AI and LLMs for agricultural extension services, virtual agents via chatbots or SMS, providing tailored advice. The FAO pilot in Ethiopia and Mozambique with its specialized LLM is a great example, and FarmerLine in Ghana using AI sentiment analysis on farmer feedback.
Getting information to farmers more effectively.
Crucial. Also, climate resilience and yield prediction. Using AI to predict rainfall patterns, there was mention of Agri in Kenya doing this. Developing or identifying climate-resilient seeds, potentially using AI in the research, and just generally enhancing the accuracy of crop yield predictions.
Adapting to climate change is huge for agriculture.
Absolutely critical. And finally, supply chain optimization and market access. Integrating AI into the agricultural supply chain for monitoring crops, forecasting yields, improving logistics. We mentioned Hello Tractor predicting demand for tractor services in Kenya and Nigeria. It's about connecting the dots better.
Can you remind us of some specific projects or tools that exemplify these applications?
Sure. We had Neuro AI in Kenya, the
Oh,
mobile app for crop disease diagnosis,
okay.
the FAO LLM pilot in Ethiopia and Mozambique for that specialized agri-food advice, Amini in Kenya using AI and satellite data for crop and soil health monitoring.
Right, Amini.
Hello, Tractor in Kenya and Nigeria for the tractor service demand prediction. FarmerLine in Ghana using AI sentiment analysis on farmer voice data. Agri in Kenya for localized rainfall prediction. And that award-winning Ghana cocoa disease detection system research.
It's fascinating to see AI being applied to such a fundamental sector, and it sounds like these aren't just theoretical concepts. They're actual tools being developed and deployed, or at least piloted seriously.
Exactly. These applications feel very tangible. Agriculture was a recurring theme in conferences, too, like the Africa Agri-Tech Conference in Pretoria and GITEX Africa in Marrakech. Discussions centered on how AI can enhance efficiency, sustainability, profitability in the sector. Microsoft even presented on using Gen AI for farm decisions, livestock health, vaccination schedules, feed costs.
So real practical business cases being discussed.
Yes, there's a clear recognition that AI can play a crucial role in addressing fundamental African challenges: food security, climate adaptation, resource efficiency, improving the livelihoods of millions of smallholder farmers. Compared to some perhaps more futuristic AI applications, these agricultural use cases feel very grounded and immediate.
That makes a lot of sense. It's addressing core needs.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we bring this deep dive into the AI landscape in Africa during March and April 2025 to a close, what are the key takeaways that really stand out for you from this period?
I think a few things really crystallize. We've observed significant momentum in policy development, particularly with Kenya's strategy and South Africa's progress. There's a vibrant, growing ecosystem of innovative startups tackling specific local needs, especially those language models from Smartly Africa.
Right.
There's that strong, very practical emphasis on the application of AI in agriculture, as we just discussed. And underpinning it all is this ongoing dynamic, this interplay between the considerable ambition for AI and the very real, persistent challenges related to infrastructure funding and developing the necessary skills base.
It really feels like we're witnessing the foundational groundwork being laid, a lot of strategic positioning, governments and innovators actively working to shape the future of AI in Africa on their own terms.
Precisely. Foundational work is a good way to put it. And because of that, it will be crucial to continue monitoring near-term trends. How are these new policies actually implemented? What happens with that proposed African AI fund? Does it materialize?
Yeah, that's a big one to watch.
How quickly do these localized AI solutions, like the language models, scale and find adoption? What are the tangible results coming out of the AI applications in agriculture over the next year or two?
Right.
And how do international partnerships evolve? These are the things to keep an eye on.
Definitely. So here's a final thought for you, our listener, to take away from this. Considering all these foundational efforts that we've discussed today, the policies, the startups, the initiatives, what do you believe is the most significant development we covered? And perhaps more importantly, how do you envision these efforts ultimately translating into tangible, equitable benefits for communities right across the African continent? It's certainly something important to reflect on as this African AI story continues to unfold at such a rapid pace. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.